gouache and focused their attention on the Santa Ynez River and watershed, and came up with the most incredible art. Many of them, most of them actually, very, very small gouache paintings that were just really exquisite. And that's how we came to really know Nicole and Holli, through that. And then they've continued their involvement since then. Nicole approached us with a very creative idea to create beautiful windows while we were closed. So you probably know we've been closed since mid-March of last year. Only open for 2 weekends, when we had a little window of being red tiered before it got yanked out from underneath all of us. And I just appreciate that they had so much sympathy for our circumstances. And so Nicole is going to share with you today her process in creating these gorgeous, gorgeous windows. And then Holli came up with an incredible installation idea for a tower, which is actually a pretty new space for us to be able to program and have art in. And it's a tricky space because it's got lots of big windows, but she saw those windows and saw an opportunity and a way to invite art here and have people be able to experience it from the outside. So super creative, and just we're so, again, grateful. Both such talented artists in their own right with very successful careers. Nicole is a Santa Barbaran graduate of UCSB and super involved in the local arts community for many, many years. Long-standing relationship with the Sundance catalog and frequent shows at Sullivan Goss Gallery. Also had her own gallery for many years. And she was the one that really took the lead in organizing the Rivers Journey project, and really showed off her talents as an organizer through that. And then Holli who just recently joined our board of directors here at the Wildling. She grew up in Redlands, got her BA at UCSB, little connection there with those two, and an MFA at San Diego State. And she and her husband have been living in Santa Barbara for over 30 years. And I can't wait for you guys to share about your installations. And I think Lauren is just gonna mention a couple things in case you want to interact and ask questions of the artists.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to thank you all again for joining us. We're so excited to have you. Because this is a webinar, you won't be able to ask questions live as we've had in past presentations, but I did want to point you to the Q&A box that shows up at the bottom of your window, and it says Q&A, and if you click it, you will see that you can ask questions, and also as questions are submitted, you can upvote questions with a little thumbs up if you see a question that someone else has asked that you might also have. And you can also, of course, use the chat box, and I'll be monitoring there to keep track of all of your questions for Holli and Nicole both. So without further ado, we'll let them get started.
Okay. So let's see. Okay. So I'm going to get started. Holli will go second. I thought I'd start with a short history of my relationship with the Wildling Museum. I started visiting the museum when it lived in Los Olivos behind Maddie's Tavern in the historic Keenan Hartley House. I loved their mission of bringing awareness to the environment through art exhibitions in hopes of inspiring a new audience to enjoy and preserve our wild spaces. In its newest location in Solvang, the Wildling hosted a show of paintings by Thomas Paquette in 2014 that celebrated 50 years of the Wilderness Act. This show included a series of gouache studies that inspired me to try the medium. I embarked on a project that focused on a stationary weather camera. I wanted to just work with the medium without always having to figure out what to paint, and immediately fell in love with gouache. And once I had a handle on the medium, I quickly turned to my other love, which is animals. And I discovered a website that has webcams all over the country. And this particular set of images came from the Brooks Falls in Katmai National Parks in Alaska, where you can tune in every summer and watch live the black bears feeding on the salmon run. And I'm primarily an oil painter, so those became small studies for my oil paintings. This one is called Fishing Lessons. I did not limit myself to bears, but also included Arctic hares, Arctic foxes, polar bears, and foxes. These are all really small, 4 by 6 inch gouache paintings on Arch's board. Somewhere along the way, I discovered that several of my pals were also inspired by Thomas's show and had taken up gouache. And so we proposed a show to Stacy at the Wildling. I think it was the summer of 2016. This was the beginning of my personal relationship and investment in the Wildling Museum. Holly and I put together the group, wrote grants, produced a catalog, and helped curate a show of over 150 small paintings that highlighted the journey of the San Ynez River from source to sea. And here's a picture of us at Jameson Lake when it was about 10%. That's Libby Smith, Nina Warner, Holli Harmon, Pamela Zwale-Burke, Connie Connolly, and myself. And the painting on the right, which is 2 by 8 inches originally, is the Hunkall Dam, which borders the lake. The exhibition opened in February of 2018 after more than a year of studying and painting images from the watershed. And it was around this time that Stacy invited Holly and I to participate as members of the exhibition committee. We have been invested in the success of the museum since our show, and we were saddened by the closure during this past year of the pandemic, particularly in November when the county, as Stacy said, moved from the purple tier to the red tier and then back to the purple tier so quickly that the museum was open for just, I think she said, like a weekend before they had to close again. So we were all looking for ways to help with the visibility, to let the public know that the museum may be closed, but not closed forever, and still working hard behind the scenes, planning upcoming shows. And so the museum has 5 front windows as well as the new tower space. And all of that took place in November when the museum closed. And so with the holidays coming, I thought winter themed windows might be the best. I happened to be reading a book in November called Wintering by Catherine May, which isn't just about the season winter, but those times in your life when something happens that pulls you from the flow of every day, something that makes you stop and reflect, regroup and recharge. Wintering and hibernation happen to be something that animals do naturally, and they prepare for this dormant season every year. I am a winter baby born in February, and my mom used to love telling the stories of stuffing her 4 children into snowsuits, only to have them return inside after 5 minutes. This was not the case with me. She actually had to come out and hunt for me and drag me inside, even though my lips were blue. And I do love the snow, and my husband and I had a cabin in the Los Padres National Forest for 10 years, where I did get my fill of snow every winter, and continues to be a theme in my work. I started looking online for effective window displays, and since it was the holidays, there were definitely a lot of snow and Christmas themes. It was the end of November, so I wanted the images that would carry through the season. It was the window was too short of a time frame to actually do anything Christmas and then not have it be obsolete. So I initially thought I would do the Solvang skyline with windmills, inspired by this window. And some other parameters that I set for the windows was that it needed to be low cost, with a quick turnaround, and with as high impact as possible. And it's just really amazing what you can create with light and paper and tape and cardboard. So as I continued hunting online, I kept being inspired by light and cast shadow. I did merchandising and window display in another lifetime, and my father happened to be a set and lighting designer, so I put those old skills to new purpose. This was a window design by Anthropology that made me think about paper and set design, and being that I'm a part-time printmaker, this also felt like the way that you would build and layer a woodblock print. This is one of my older woodblock prints, three color, which kind of informed the layering of the images that I designed for the window and helped me how to construct them. And this is another woodblock print, but this was done with just blind embossing without any ink on it. And I did like the clean white and the shadow. So it was easy to choose an animal for the window since the fox is the Wildling mascot and logo. And inspired by my original fox paintings, I decided to tell the story of a fox hibernating in winter. I started with just a quick sketch in a sketchbook and then worked backwards trying to figure out how it would sit in the window, what would be the best way to build it from away from the museum, and then be able to put it back together on site. So from those sketches, I worked out the drawings in Photoshop and designed these very much like I would design a multicolored woodblock print. And when lit from the different layers would cast shadow and create volume through the different value of light on the white paper. Then I made mock-ups. You can see in the upper left-hand corner my fingers. These are about 9 by 9 inches, and the sketchbook paper was stiff enough that I could just slice a piece of cardboard and jam the paper in, and they stood up. So it was a great way to figure out whether or not that was going to work. And just you can see I just put little LED lights strung through them. And here's the set of 4, which tells the story of the fox heading back to his den, getting to the edge of the forest, pausing before tucking into his den for a good night's sleep. Once I figured out all the logistics and got approval of the images, I projected the Photoshop drawings onto a larger piece of paper that turned out to be 45 inches tall by 40 inches wide, and then proceeded to cut them out. This is a 2-ply mat board, so it's got some heft to it, but it was still easy to cut out. It had enough weight. It also had enough weight not to buckle when I hung them. And then each piece of paper has about 4 inches between, so that I could string LED lights in between each of the layers. And this is what it looks like kind of late afternoon in my studio. And you can see I did just a basic structure out of cardboard just to test. And the large sheets of paper are just hanging by these clips. And this is what I imagined it would look like at night in the windows at the Wildling, kind of twinkle lights, fireflies, with kind of a dark cast on the front panel. This is installation day, and the armature ended up getting built out of foam core, and you can see it's kind of like Lincoln logs. They basically cut slits into the foam board and then just slid in these cross pieces. And then again, here's the clips that just the paper hangs from, and having 4 of them in there really just stabilized the whole structure. So I would hang 1 sheet, and then you can see here's the 1 strand of lights, and I would tape the lights onto the back, and then just put the 2nd sheet in and string lights. And then here's me with the last panel being strung with the lights. And then they all just slid right into the windows. Of course, when you build things away from the site, there's always some little snafus and happy accidents. I did not remember this seam down the center of the window, so I did end up having to recut one of the panels just because the poor little fox was covered. But one thing that I did not plan for was that there's lights that existed in the windows at the Wildling already, and I believe there's 3 colors, and then they fade in and out into a full range of rainbow colors. So serendipity and happy accident, the twinkle lights were really not necessary, but the effects were just fantastic, better than I probably could have even planned for. They're just beautiful. A little bit of luck and pixie dust. And because the museum has been closed throughout, I've started working on a new iteration that'll take us forward into the spring as the museum reopens, just to kind of keep them in the window just a little bit longer. And with the springtime comes new life and growth and color, as well as rebirth and opening to whatever may come next. And what's next for me is 2 shows. My weather patterns will be included in the biomass exhibit that's opening next month at the Wildling with 10 other artists. And I also am in the studio preparing for my next solo show at Sullivan Goss, which will open in August. So I hope I can see you all around the shows. May we all be vaccinated soon. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, Nicole.
And that was it's all you, Holly.
Okay, let's hope my technology is successful. So, now why am I not getting my screen when I do
Share.
screen? Let's just try it. Are you seeing my screen?
We're seeing your screen, but you're on Zoom
Okay.
right now.
Now can you see the beginning, the nature of clouds?
No.
No, you
No.
might need to stop screen
Stop
sharing and then
there?
share
Okay.
the presentation.
Yeah, I'm trying. Now, share screen. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. You have to choose a window when you
Well,
share.
when that opens up, it just says whiteboard or Safari Post attendee Zoom. And it used to say share my screen before.
Do you have your presentation open?
I do. Okay. Let's see. I still get whiteboard or Safari Post attendee Zoom.
Let me, hang on. I can pull it up on my end, just one moment.
Any luck?
I'm not seeing anything.
She's working on it right now. If anyone
Okay.
has any questions for Nicole
Yeah,
in the
maybe we
meantime,
can do that.
feel free to type them in the.
Okay, now I'm getting something. I'm getting a new one. I can do it, I think.
Yeah.
I keep on clicking. So let's see. Are you there? Can you see
There we
me?
go.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, joy. Hallelujah.
Yay.
Hallelujah. Okay. All right. Well, after that nerve-wracking beginning, I just want to be sure that I thank you all for showing up. It means a lot. And for everybody who reads my newsletters to the very end and sends me a note, thank you, thank you. So today, my goal is really to share my intent in making art and where I find inspiration. Because there's a path that I've made through the last decade in my art journey. Of course, I'm primarily a painter and a printmaker, and now on occasion a cloud maker, and now a Kokodama ball maker. In 2016, Nicole and I joined 4 other amazing artists to follow the San Ynez River from source to sea. And this became the River's Journey Project, which debuted at the Wildling Museum. And my fellow artists and their work and the river were my inspirations. We did create a book about this journey, and it's available online at the Wildling's gift shop. You can see the art from our adventure and read beautiful essays from our community leaders and environmental experts. But this project really solidified my fascination with clouds. My first blog post for the project was titled, "My Head is in the Clouds," and I wrote, "I love our metaphorical route to follow the source of our water in the Central Coast region." The painting that accompanies the post was made in 2008, which was 13 years ago. It's a large oil painting compared to the tiny gouache paintings from the River's Journey project. And I share this to note that my art expression is always evolving and to recognize my long history with clouds. When I explore an idea, I chase it through research in all forms, from science to poetry. And I was particularly inspired by Luke Howard's cloud classification system documented in 1803. Now, this was an era where science is a rather new concept. And from there, I found poems by Goethe. He was so excited that someone had finally defined clouds by name, he composed poems about their names and about Luke Howard himself. Clouds became the talisman for the highest source of water in our watershed. At the time, we were creating really small gouache paintings, and some of mine were as small as 2 by 2 inches. One idea can lead to another, and inspirations often bleed into new projects. My personal cloud construction began in my studio. My husband, Terry, helped build an armature for the mega cloud, which has floated around in my barn studio for several years. Now, I can make this huge cloud look stormy or psychedelic, depending on my mental atmosphere. 5 manageable sized clouds followed. Technology these days is so amazing. These are high-tech wonders, and I can program the lights to any color, or I can make them respond to music. These little clouds gathered in Santa Barbara City Hall as part of the River's Journey project. Next, I built small dioramas of clouds for the Rose Compass exhibition at the Westmont Ridley Tree Museum of Art. Clouds showed up in my paintings. We had a River's Journey show at Sullivan Goss Gallery. And for me, the Santa Ynez River took form as a female figure. And this was the seed for my next series. The Calafia Series explores California's environment and cultures through the eyes of our state's namesake, Calafia. She's a warrior queen who ruled the island of Calafia, and I had a show at Sullivan Goss this summer. My warrior queen prevailed, and we had a great exhibition in spite of our worldwide pandemic. Now, both of these paintings use clouds to tell their stories. With my newfound free time due to COVID, I worked in my garden. I created a living plant wall, and then I discovered Kokodama balls online. Now, this is a little video I made about how I make Kokodama balls. I use very technical terms such as making mud balls and choosing plants to smush things together. And I sourced sheet moss from Tennessee, which is wonderful to find. It was kind of a challenge. So after you wrap up your mud ball with the sheet moss, you now have a moss ball. And that's what gets wrapped up in twine. And some Kokodama ball makers are really experts, and their wrapping is actually really beautiful, kind of like macrame. So after you tie it up, you make a loop, and voila, you have a Kokodama. So COVID has taken its toll on a number of industries, and the arts have felt a tremendous blow. Our art museums had to close their doors. However, all clouds have silver linings, and we recently had added the Tower Room Gallery to the museum, and it sits on a corner and is surrounded by windows. We were pondering on how to create engagement over this unknown period of closure, and then a brainstorm hit us. The Tower Room provided a perfect place to see the museum. A proposal was designed to use my clouds and kokodamas, and once again, my husband helped build this armature. We affectionately call it the taco because it folds in half, and this was essential in order to fit it through the door. Those orange tags are fishing line that are threaded through the fabric and tied onto the metal grid. It took a team of friends and family to paint the walls, install the grid, hang the tree and the clouds. And my job was to unfurl the individual fishing lines and hang the crystals and plants. The installation is a little biosphere, kind of like a snow globe, where plants float in the air rather than root in the ground. Rain becomes solid and static as glass crystals. Clouds are lit from within rather than from the sun. Tree stumps covered in mirror capture the cloud-covered ceiling. Now, all of these are opposites of what exists in the real world. When you're inside, you get a multi-sensory experience, and the sound of rain and thunder surrounds the room, and depending on what is in bloom, you can catch the scent of blossoms. I plan on changing the plants as the seasons change, so it's an exhibit that you want to visit often. By the time you see my work in public, there's often a new project on the horizon in my studio. We've been busy working toward the next exhibition at the Wildling called Biomass, which is all about mass, whether it's in quantity or size. Now here's a sneak peek of Nicole's work. And this idea has sent me in a new direction. I found that I could search my own photo collection with the word cloudy, and it pulled up every photo I had taken in the last 15 years from different places around the world. I'm really into clouds. I had over 6,000 pictures with clouds, and a great memory is attached to each of them. Yeah. Now I'm experimenting with a new body of work that was inspired by Mark Strand's poem titled 89 Clouds and the incredible artists in the upcoming Biomass exhibition. The work literally has a silver lining. I want to create a mass of cloudscapes, like the poem, on flea market silver. The discarded silver also holds a memory and history, like my pictures. Maybe the item was a gift or was used daily during family meals. All of this energy, from my wonder with clouds to selecting which pieces of silver to paint, gets reincarnated into a new body of work. Here's the truth you have to wrestle with. The reason that art is valuable is precisely why I can't tell you how to do it. If there were a map, there'd be no art, because art is the act of navigating without a map. Don't you hate that? I love that there's no map. And that quote is by Seth Godin. Now, after leading you down this path of inspiration from sky to earth and back to the clouds, my intention remains the same while making art. And that is, my wish is to strike up a conversation with you. So I hope that gets lots of questions going.
Well, thank you both, Holly and Nicole. Those were both awesome presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your patience with my fumble. But
There's always at least one. It just happens. And you queued it up earlier, so. You know, I have a quick question while we're waiting for people to post. And with your new silver work, I'm just curious, like, how are you treating the metal before you do your paint, or can you just do it directly on it?
doing it directly, I do clean it. I have done in the past a couple oil paintings on copper. And when I researched that, that was really interesting. It's such an old method that there's notes that former artists, you know, before we had panels and canvas and everything, they would paint on copper, but then they would rub it with garlic, which I thought, I don't know, it's probably some chemical reaction, but basically I'm going directly on the silver. It takes a long time for it to dry, so it's very slow. But I think it left a little bit of room where some of the silver can come through on occasion if I don't cover every inch, which makes it kind of interesting too.
We did get a nice question from Joan Davidson. She says, when do either of you sleep?
Oh,
Very little.
yeah. Or we sleep really well. We're so tired. One way or the other.
She also asked a follow-up. She asked, how do you deal with the humidity that must be high in the exhibit? Which...
Well, I'll let everybody, you guys water the balls as much as I do. It's a very warm room, so a lot of the moisture just evaporates pretty quickly.
Yeah, and then there's air that's constantly circulating because it does heat up so fast from the sun. And then the other thing, Joan, I would point out is that room is very isolated from any other part of the museum. So it's kind of off there on its own. So no issues so far.
And Susan asked, how often do we have to water the Kokodama balls, which we've all been enjoying, caretaking.
There's a little system. Monday and Thursdays are our water days. And Stacy and Lauren have primarily been the waterers. And I come up and try to take that job off their plates and switch out some of the balls as different things bloom. And I'm finding other ones that I want to hang for a while. So it's always changing.
Yeah, it's always fun when I come in too, because Holly's been up here at least once a week practically, if not more, with our exhibition planning. But when I come in on a Sunday and I see the new flowers that I may have missed, it's always fun to see the ranunculus or a new flower popping through. So it'll definitely be something that continues to change, as Holly mentioned, and it'll be fun to see when we are open and also from the outside. We have another question from Mary. She asked, poetry is a big part of how you portray your art. Have you written poetry yourself? For Holly, but I wouldn't be surprised if Nicole is also a poet.
Nicole and I share when we find poetry. That's something that we'll send off to each other, like, oh my gosh, I found this great poet or this poem. I don't write poetry. I haven't ever tried, but I am a fan. Yeah. So every artist needs an audience, and I am a poet's audience.
That's right. Yeah, and I think I tried, but I would not say successfully, and not since college.
Susan asked for Nicole, when will the Spring Fox story be in the windows?
I was hoping soon, but I think that now that we've done this talk, that I'll probably wait a couple of weeks just to give people a chance to see this iteration before I switch them out. So I'm probably going to try and coordinate it with the opening of the museum. So 17th, Stacy? around thereabouts?
We're trying.
That's right. Yeah.
Susan asks, Holly, how do you plan to display the silver pieces? Have you considered doing a table setting on a table?
I love that idea. That is fantastic. And you know, what a great thing for everybody who's attending to know is I get so much inspiration from my fellow artists. I love going to see their studio visits. There's usually 4 or 5 stories behind an artist that you don't know, because you might only be seeing one kind of artwork from them in public. But also going to museums is another place that gives me a great amount of inspiration. Just like we discovered Thomas Paquette and Gouache, and then it was like, oh my gosh, I've got to try that and get excited and enthused. So Susie, your idea is fantastic, and I might do that. That's super. Thank you.
Robin asked, how long will both of these amazing exhibits be up? So Holly's is up through, we've tentatively said fall. So we might put a hard date on it at some point, but we're having fun with it so far. And it'll definitely be up for a while when we're open, because we want people to get a chance to see it and appreciate it. And then Nicole's, the winter ones we had talked about having up through the spring, but now it's extending. So we'll definitely have them up for a while. So everyone will get a chance. Lots of positive comments. Monica says, loved seeing the journey of the work come into being, wonderfully inspiring. Maria wrote, it's more of a statement than a question. I feel fortunate to have seen both of your installations, and I love how immersive both works are. Holly, yours is peaceful and soothing. Nicole, even though I can't walk into your environments, I can feel sheltered by them. Which is very true.
Nice. Yes.
Kathy asked, will this lecture eventually be put on YouTube or presented again? I'd like many of my artist friends to view it. Very professional, interesting, inspiring, stimulated all kinds of ideas for me. And yes, that's something I forgot to mention. We do post recordings of all of our presentations on YouTube. We're at Wildling Museum on YouTube. And then if you're subscribed to our email newsletter, which I think a lot of you are, we will share a recording in our next public newsletter. So be sure to check it out there. And it'll probably be posted, I would say, within the next 48 hours to our YouTube channel. Susan asked, what would you say is the ideal time of day to see each of the installations?
Well, mine personally, I think with the lights in the evening, that's when you get the most drama, because they're very quiet just when they're just the white paper during the day. And those windows just get a full blast of sun most of the day, right, Stacy?
However, I've been there early in the morning, and it's really beautiful to walk by the windows and see the tree branches, but then the trees are reflected onto that. Mm-hmm. And so it has a really surreal, like what's happening in real life has been put on top of this pictorial scene. It's really quite lovely during the day too, in my mind. If I were a photographer, I think that would just be the most fun time to play with the reflections and everything. What's behind the glass and what's happening on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Monica has made a couple comments. Holly, she loves your idea of the silver lining. She thinks they're great ideas. And then she just really enjoyed seeing the journey of both of your works through your presentations.
Thank you.
Thanks, Monica.
That's feels good to hear those nice comments.
There's another good one from RT Livingston in the comments in chat. I have less a question than a comment. One of the things that impresses me about both Holly and Nicole is their complete dedication to the environment. Their footprints are minimal, but the results are spectacular. The work is so poetic. It has a beautiful didactic quality, one that makes you want to run outside and take it all in.
Oh, thank you,
Thank
Artie.
you.
You can say things so well. You're a master of words.
Joan added for you, Holly, can't you imagine a Judy Chicago full table?
Wow.
Yeah, that's
Great
what I was
ideas.
thinking.
I love it. I love it.
And Nina asked if the cloud room is lit up at night. Yes, it is lit up at night. It looks very cool at night.
And now that Terry, my husband, just got vaccinated today and things have opened up, maybe by the time the museum is opened, I'll be able to come up and go to dinner and then drive by in the evening when things are, dusk is falling, and see it all more at night.
Susan asked you, Holly, what is your favorite cloud and why?
You know, those cumulus clouds are so showy, the big puffy ones, but I think a little bit of the cirrus ones that are also known as some of the little fishtails, those are a little magical too, just because they kind of are little polka dots in the sky. I don't know, it's really hard because the more I learn about them, the more fascinated I get with their shapes. And then I'm reminded that that's how people determined what was going to happen next in their life, is they were looking at cloud shapes. They didn't have their weather app on the iPhone, which is what I live by. So they could intuit a little more information.
And Joan asks, how do you feel about those very surreal lenticular clouds, which I think she means the ones that look kind of like UFOs.
Yes, yes. You know, I have not seen those in my own experience. I've only seen pictures of them, really. I mean, I haven't captured any of them. But I'm also really fascinated with the thought that even though this isn't a cloud, but the, what do you call it, jet trails, you know, that planes leave behind. And in the future, I'm wondering if the sky is going to be our last open horizon. You know, the way that we look at land now and say, oh, look at these open horizons. I wonder if our skyscape is going to change, you know, being very, what would you call it? You know, science fiction thinking, you know, with drones and everything, maybe flying cars, who knows?
And Joan says, we do get those lenticular clouds here in the valley. And yes, every now and then I drive down to work from Los Alamos, and every now and then I see one, and it's never where I can pull over and take a photo. And I just have to remember it as I'm driving and admire.
Yeah, and that's the fun. I encourage you all to look up 89 Clouds by Mark Strand, because he has some really good little one-liners about that feeling of wanting to catch the clouds, you know, and they never cooperate.
Alexis wrote, I sure hope we leave the sky alone.
Me too, me too.
I wanted to ask Nicole, just, I mean, we saw both of your processes, and it's just, I know the time that you spent must have been so much more than we're seeing in the photos. And I mean, were you freehand sketching and cutting? I'm sure there's a lot of math and planning that went into your cutouts.
Really, you know, it was really actually kind of magical. I really didn't have a lot going on in my studio, and with the holidays, none of us were really making plans to go visit family and you know, have those big blocks. I just had a lot of time, and so it was just something fun to do, and didn't take as much time as I thought it would. I think those were the parameters I set. It really needed to be simple and cost, I had cost in mind, that I didn't want it to cost a lot. I didn't want it to usurp a lot of time in my studio, and I just wanted it to be beautiful for the museum. And so I kind of really kept it to that. So it didn't take as long as I thought.
That's hugely impressive to me, because I can't imagine cutting one, let alone how many, but
well, I mean,
appreciative.
The shapes are very simplified. I mean, they definitely, I've seen, it's funny when you start doing something like that, and then all of a sudden, I'm sure Holly has that experience with, there's Kokodama balls everywhere. Like everywhere I've looked now, there's paper cuts, and they're so intricate. And I look at mine like, oh, I was just a bad paper cutter. Because some of them, those laser cuts and everything, are so detailed. And mine literally were, I considered them, in my mind, woodblock prints. And so it was all about making the shapes as simple as possible, so that also then they could be read really easily from a distance. Like the cars go by so quickly, I wanted them to be chunky enough that people would look over and see, oh, that's a tree. Oh, there's an animal in there, and make them want to circle back around and look at them again.
I do hope that you do some wood blocks of that, because I think it would be a beautiful series of the whole story.
Yeah. It's my plan. It's on the list.
Yay.
Seems like it wants to maybe even be a children's book. Like there's some little fairy tale there.
Very fanciful.
Yes. But again, you say that, and I had that thought too, Stacy, and then all of a sudden I'm seeing some that there are illustrators out there who have done exactly that, paper cuts, and then turned them into children's books. And the cutting is so detailed and intricate, and that's what I mean. Is like, oh, I'm not really a printmaker. I'm not really somebody who does paper cut. I can, but it's not what I do all the time, and so it's not as developed, say, as somebody who that's what they do for a living, or that's their chosen medium.
We have
your box paintings were certainly there. It's there in your history, and I because I know your work. It's like I look at those beautiful little gouache box paintings, and then I see the trees from your woodblock prints. It's already all there.
Yeah,
they're all in the same universe.
Exactly.
I don't know the answer to this question. I don't know if you do, Nicole. Tekla asked, what is the origin of this type of cutout? Europe? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, because I know that the Danish have the paper cut, right?
Yes.
I think there's a bunch of different cultures that have some form of paper cut.
Yeah.
Germans.
Japanese.
And then the
Mexican. Yeah.
Right. So I'm not sure how far back it goes.
Isn't too
Sarah wrote in our box here, she said paper cutting originated in China. I didn't know.
There you go.
I was thinking of Hans Christian Andersen up there in Sullivan, has a lot of the paper cuts in the fairy tales.
Right.
Robin asked, why were your gouache paintings all so small?
Well, the person who inspired us, Thomas Paquette, his paintings were teeny. I mean, mine are probably considered huge compared to some of his. His were like 1 by 2 inches, some of them that we saw, 2 by 3 inches. So mine are big at 4 by 6 inches. But it was nice working small in a medium that, like when you're making large oil paintings, you're really invested. Your time is invested, and so this was a way to the gouache worked a lot like my oil paintings, the way I could layer it, let it dry, and then layer it some more. And so it was nice to work small and just push the color and not have, if something didn't work out, then you just threw it away. It was 4 by 6 inches. So I liked the immediacy, and then my mom got sick and I wasn't having a lot of time in my studio to work on big oil paintings. So it was just this wonderful, I always had my gouache set up and I could sit and work for 20 minutes at a time. So the small format was just perfect. And now I've done it so long and I've done so many of them that the weather patterns project, I have over 100 of those. And then I've got map drawers that are just full of these little tiny paintings now I've been working on them probably since that show. So 2014, 2015. Mm-hmm. So there are hundreds of these things multiplying in my drawers.
Robin asked, the smaller, the harder, I imagine? I don't know.
Sometimes I think they can take a lot of time, more time than you imagine, you know?
Yeah. Sometimes I mean, I find like the larger paintings are more difficult in some ways because you're only, you know, your vision, you're only able to see a certain amount, you know, and then you're constantly stepping back and going forward, but you're always only working within the parameters of what you can see. And so the little ones, the whole composition is right there. You're working on all of it at the same time. And so with the larger paintings, I tend to take photographs and shrink it just so that I can have that same experience of just seeing the entirety of it, to do the problem solving and make sure that the drawing is right. So I find working small, just in that regard, time-wise, they can take as long to build, but I oftentimes find them easier just because I can see the problem right away. Whereas with the big one, you can work on it for a whole week and then realize you've drawn something badly and you've been painting around it.
We have a question from Joan. She said, I thought your Compass Rose group decided to work in the small scale for the show.
Yes, we all did small format inspired by Thomas's work. But we're all also oil painters. So we each had one large piece that represented the medium that we normally work in.
Yeah, we found people loved how small and just beautiful those pieces were. That the smallness was a huge attraction, I would say, for most people, I think, coming to the show.
Yeah. Poetry. There's our poetry.
Yeah.
Visual poems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we have lots of positive comments. Susan mentioned how the beautiful simplicity of your work, Nicole, gave it a strong silhouette.
Thank you.
I'm just looking here through the chat. Nancy said, Nicole, children don't necessarily appreciate intricate cuttings. Simple is good.
Mm-hmm.
Words of wisdom.
I'm gonna stick with that. I'm gonna go with that. Thank you.
I think it's almost harder. You can't visually get caught up in details. Like, you have to nail the essence of it in a simple way. That's super challenging.
Yeah, your composition is there. That's where you're really focused, is on composition. Yeah. So you do that so well.
I will credit my dad with a lot of that, because growing up as a set designer, he was always trying to figure out how to melt down something very complicated that then he could translate onto the stage and build very simply, and then light it so that it still had all that complication, but didn't take a lot of effort or materials or means to produce it. And so I spent a lot of my childhood, I have these old sketchbooks of his that they're little 2x2 inch studies, you know, of that, exactly that, just design and composition and figuring out how to make a stage set out of trees or interiors. I think I just absorbed it.
Yeah.
Good lessons.
Yeah. Yeah. And ones that you're not consciously making either as a kid. You're just kind of watching what they're doing, and then it just becomes part of the fabric of who you become and how you see things.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I appreciate about the, is it PCPA theater that's there in Sullivan,
Yeah.
is having that round stage and how they build sets, you know, because you have to kind of engage with it on 3 or 4 different sides. And the designs that I've seen for the shows that I've gone up to see, it's really fascinating.
Right. And being one of 4 children, we were always dragged into the scene shop, and my dad did he worked for PCPA, he worked for the Libero Theater, he worked for the Arlington, he worked for City College. So we spent a lot of time in all of those different areas. He would babysit, you know, he was setting the lights and we'd be running around the stage. And when we got old enough, we were allowed to start using the power tools and help make the sets, and it was very fun. And it's really magical, you know. I remember distinctly being probably 8 or 9, and I had carpet samples, and I was allowed to use the bandsaw, and he said just cut out these shapes, and just like different beans shapes, and they became stones that laid out on the floor on the stage. They glued them down and then did the splatter painting, and then once they were lit, they were cobblestones. So those kinds of things were just, you know, you're just, again, like you're working on something so abstract. It's like looking at a blurry slide, and then all of a sudden it gets dialed in and focused, and you realize what it is that you were doing. And very magical.
Yeah. I had one more personal question for Holly. Do you remember your first Kokodama ball, and what kind of plant did you use?
I think I was giving them away, would make them and give them away to friends. And I was experimenting with different mosses. And I think I did some combinations of, what's that green, really bright green moss? Scotch moss.
Scotch moss.
Yeah, Scotch moss with coleus. And then I discovered other mosses that you can just kind of grow on their own. And it's a rabbit hole. Those were my first ones. And then for Christmas, I got these tiny little seedlings, pine tree seedlings, and they looked like little Charlie Brown Christmas trees, you know, and I made those and gave those as little Christmas gifts because I thought they were perfect for our COVID Christmas, you know, a little wig of a Christmas.
I think maybe we're good with questions, and we've hit the hour point. I do want to finish. Our board president, Kevin, has been here, and he left a comment thanking you both for your great presentations, and how much he loves both installations, and just how appreciative he is of your support for the Wildling. So
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. And truly, to all of my friends and people that are out there, the Wildling appreciates you and needs you, and thanks for showing up today.
Yes.
Yes.
yeah,
And we look forward to seeing you at the museum next month.
Yes.
yes, for sure.
The show is going to be very exciting. Great way to you know, open up again.
Yeah, and stay tuned because we will be doing virtual and maybe other kinds of programming around biomass. So stay tuned for word about that.
Yeah.
Great.
And look out for the webinar recording coming soon. We'll send that to all of you, and we'll see you next time.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Farewell.
Thank you, Holly and Nicole.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.